let's finish up chapter 13. So we've been talking about oligopoly market structure. And if you've watched the 3 previous videos that we started here for chapter 13, we began this series by asking, a couple questions, right, to kind of understand what market structure we're operating in. So the first question was, do you set your own price? If the answer is yeah, I set my own price, which it normally is, then that, precludes a perfectly competitive market structure. Second question is, do you have competitors? And if the answer is yeah, I have competitors, which it normally is, then that precludes a monopoly market structure. You then take a look at the concentration ratio and the HHI, and we talked about the thresholds there. And if in fact the market is concentrated, then you look at the oligopoly market structure that we've been looking at, right? And this is real world, right? I mean, that's exactly what the government does when firms like, if Delta Airlines and American Airlines were working towards a merger, and the federal government would get involved, because I guarantee you the concentration ratio and the HHI in the airline industry is very high. So it's a very concentrated, meaning it is an oligopoly, and it's dominated by just a few large firms. Okay, and that's why you see in the news all the time antitrust activities by the government to preclude concentration and to try to force more competition in markets, okay? So let's go back to that final question, though. If the concentration ratio is not bad, say 25%, and the HHI is low, then the firm operates in the fourth and final market structure, which is monopolistically competitive. Monopolistically competitive market structure. And that is a competitive market structure, right? But what's that monopolistically thing mean? Well, let's talk about it here in a minute, okay? In fact, let's talk about it right now. So let's look at the attributes of a monopolistically competitive market structure, okay? So just like in all the other market structures, what's the goal of the firm? It's to maximize profit, okay? And what tells a firm what to maximize or how to maximize the profit? It's looking at where your marginal cost and your marginal revenue, intersect, and taking, that's going to define both the price and the quantity, right, that are agreed to by the buyer and the seller. Okay, in the short run, a firm in a monopolistically competitive market structure, and oh, by the way, it's the most popular market structure. Most firms operate in a monopolistically competitive market structure, okay? And in the short run, on any given day, may find themselves earning economic profit or economic loss, or, zero economic profit, etc., okay? In the long run, though, again, this has everything to do with barriers. And because it is a competitive market structure, and there are no or very few barriers, then in the long run, again, assuming that the barriers cannot be maintained, profit is competed down to zero economic profit or normal profit. And again, the explanation on that, let's go back to the perfectly competitive market structure. So that would have been, chapter 11. And go back and re-listen to those, because there's a pretty good explanation of why it gets competed back down to zero for that, okay? Firms, there are many. It is a competitive market structure, okay? The graph, as I explained before, is the same, so it looks the same. So your marginal revenue is still below your price, right? Marginal revenue, that curve is below the demand curve. Price is still set by the firm, and your product. Now, okay, so same graph, so it is not efficient. There is deadweight loss present, and you can, in fact, price discriminate, okay? So that leaves us with, what is the key? The key here is a term called differentiation, okay? And in fact, that is also defines the product, because here's the way this works, okay? This is a competitive market structure, meaning there are many firms competing for your dollars and those consumers, okay? But through differentiation, right? If a seller is able to differentiate its product in the mind of the consumer, then to the degree that they're successful, they get to operate like their own monopoly, right? So, I mean, let me take an extreme case, right? So, Porsche has one of the best ad campaigns. I'm absolutely certain that the advertising manager was an economics major, because what the tagline says is, Porsche, there is no substitute. Well, think about that. Go back and watch the videos on Monopoly. That's the very definition of a monopoly, no substitute. So by Porsche saying, Porsche, there is no substitute, what they're literally saying is, look, we are a monopoly on kick-ass, badass sports cars. And you can have us, Porsche, or, there's everybody else. We are unique in that there are no substitutes. Now, is that real? Well, it doesn't matter, right? Here's the beauty of differentiation. How do firms differentiate? Largely through advertising. Now, and I'll go through a quick explanation here in a minute, but the answer is largely through advertising. And it doesn't matter if it's real. Great advertising, it doesn't matter what the truth is. All that matters is that the consumer believes it. So in the mind of the consumer, if Porsche is able to establish and the consumer believes there really is no substitutes, then it is successful. And in fact, Porsche gets to operate more like a monopoly in terms of, enjoying a higher profit and some of those attributes of a monopoly. In fact, you can go through the attributes here. Some look and are equal to what we talked about in a perfectly competitive market structure, but some are equal to and are equal to what we talked about in the monopoly market structure. So there you go. All right, how do firms? Oh, I hit the camera. All right. Okay. All right. How do firms differentiate? Marketing. Okay, get ready. I'm going to give you an entire marketing course in about 2.5 minutes. Okay, here we go. Marketing is everything that happens from the time that a product leaves the factory until it gets into the hands of the consumer. Let me say that again. Marketing is everything that happens from the time a product leaves the factory and gets into the hand of the consumer. And it is marketing that firms use to differentiate. Now, marketing is sometimes taught or referred to as the 5 Ps. The first is place, and that's just a fancy word for distribution and logistics. Logistics. I just said that marketing is everything that happens from the time it leaves the factory till it gets into the hands of the consumer. And logistics, supply chain, all of that can be a differentiator, right? I mean, Amazon is talking about, you order something and it's delivered by a drone, almost immediately. That's game changing. That's a differentiator, right? You're going to go to Amazon if in fact you think that, a drone can deliver your pizza, right now. And supply chain is a fascinating part of marketing, fascinating part of economics, and can be a differentiator, okay? Product. Again, we've talked about that products sometimes are differentiators. Sometimes a product is so unique, so different, it sort of differentiates it's just on its own. Back in the 90s, it was blackberries, right? We used to call them crackberries. If you didn't have a BlackBerry, you were nobody, and there was really no substitute for BlackBerries. And then along came the early 2000s, and bam, iPhones, right? And when iPhones first came out, man, there was nothing like it. And so the product itself differentiated because it was so unique and so different. Packaging. Sometimes the differentiation is all in the packaging. You see that a lot in cosmetics. You see it a lot of makeup. Hell, I thought about this the other day. I went to get a bottle of Crown, and was standing in line, and there was this bottle shaped like a skeleton. It was Day of the Dead. It was tequila, and I thought, there's not anybody on the face of the planet that buys that bottle for the tequila. What are they doing? They're buying it for the bottle. They're buying it for the packaging. An excellent way to differentiate your product. Place, product, price. Sometimes price is a differentiator. Sometimes everyday low pricing. So everyday low pricing, right? That's what makes Walmart Walmart. Right? Even people that hate Walmart shop at Walmart because of everyday low pricing. Costco, 10% over cost, that's it. So sometimes price is a differentiator. Sometimes it works the other way though, right? Premium pricing. The reason people buy Ferraris, aside from them being relatively cool sports cars, is premium pricing, right? If you have to ask, you can't afford it. Right, everybody that drives a Ferrari, everybody that sees a Ferrari goes, oh well, there's somebody that spent a lot of money for that car. But anybody that drives a Ferrari, part of what they're doing is saying something about their status or whatever, and it largely has to do with premium pricing. It works that way with Rolex watches, any sort of premium, category that caters to the wealthy and the successful, that's a differentiator. That's why people buy those categories of product and pay those prices, okay? And then lastly, there's promotion. And here's what people usually think when they think of differentiation, right? Public relations, promotions, events, and then of course, advertising. And advertising is the number one way in which products are differentiated. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. The funny thing about advertising is it doesn't have to even be true. Now, I will say this. Laws have been enacted, for over 100 years that have made false advertising illegal. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, or it doesn't mean that firms don't skirt the very boundaries or edges in terms of what is legal and ethical and et cetera. So the old caveat emptor, buyer beware, still applies here in that you have to. Can you hear my cat? He's upset because I haven't fed him yet. I need to go feed him. Here, just a minute. Be quiet. Be quiet. I'm on the video here. Sorry about that. So anyway, advertising. It doesn't even have to be accurate and real. The consumer just has to believe it. And that's how products differentiate, okay? And that's the whole trick to this monopolistically competitive market structure is differentiating your product such that you can operate as your own little monopoly, hence the name monopolistically competitive market structure. One couple final examples. Fast food is a good example, right? Fast food is the quintessential monopolistically competitive market structure. Why do people go to Burger King, right? Because it's flame broiled. That's their big differentiator. Why do people go to McDonald's? It's not the taste of the hamburger, right? McDonald's hamburgers are not great hamburgers. But that's not why people go to McDonald's. They go because it's quick, because it's cheap, because the experience is standardized, right? And all of this speaks to branding, right? At the end of the day, it's advertising and it's branding that differentiates. And branding is just a fascinating subject that we're not going to cover in depth anymore in this video. But if you're interested in it, go out and do some research, right? Because what firms do is they spend just billions of dollars a year to establish a relationship and an understanding so that it gets to the point where you don't even have to see words. All you have to see is a picture, right? That's a poor picture, but if you assume that that's a Mercedes logo, what do you know about Mercedes? What kind of branding efforts has Mercedes made? Well, it's upscale, it's luxury, it's engineering. It's all about engineering, right? The best engineered cars in the world, blah, 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 blah. That kind of branding activity happens across all categories and all industries, and it's how firms differentiate, okay? So that concludes chapter 13, and that concludes the 4 market structures that we've been talking about. So I hope that all makes sense. If not, rewatch the video, and we'll go to chapter 14 and wrap things up.